Hey everybody, my name is Alex. I'm the head of development here at DBVisit, and I thought I'd just make a really quick video explaining some of the differences between our disaster recovery product, DBVisit Standby Multi-Platform, and Microsoft SQL Server availability groups. So what you can see on screen right now is kind of a list of some major features for both availability groups and our Standby Multi-Platform product for SQL Server, and I thought I'd just quickly take you through it. So starting right at the top here, obviously in order to enable availability groups for SQL Server, you need to have Windows file clustering set up. This is not a requirement for Standby Multi-Platform. So what this means in the real world is that our product can often be brought online faster than availability groups as part of that initial implementation. Both solutions feature guided configuration creation. That's disaster recovery configuration creation, of course. But for availability groups, of course, you work with one database at a time. It is, of course, not unusual to have dozens or even hundreds of databases in a single instance, so this can get kind of tedious. In Standby Multi-Platform, we have a way to create disaster recovery configurations across multiple databases at the same time. So just to show you a quick example of that, all you would do is, you're looking at Standby Multi-Platform right here. All you would do is go to New Configuration, select the database platform you wish to work on, so in this case SQL Server, and you would get a list of all the various databases within each instance. So in order to create disaster recovery configurations for more than one database at a time, you could simply click this button to select all databases in an instance, select the standby instance I wish to use, and as you can see at the bottom of the screen here, once I put the license key in, I can actually create multiple configurations at the same time. So in this case, I would be creating this one and this one all at the same time. And I can do this just as easily for 200 databases rather, as I can for these two. We also support transportable media for standby database creation. So when you set up availability groups for a particular database, that initial standby database creation has to actually happen over the network. This can be kind of challenging if you've got a very large database. So again, in Standby Multi-Platform, we have a way for you to do that using transportable media. So to show you a quick example of that, let's create a configuration first that we can use. We'll go maybe this one here. We'll take this one over to this one. By the way, that's as easy as simple as that is. Literally, I just select the source database and the standby instance, enter the license key, and you can see here's our new configuration here at the bottom. So if I wanted to set up a standby database, right at the top here, I have this option called Is the Standby Backup Destination Transportable Media? And if I hit that to yes, what that means is that I can actually back up to a removable device, such as a flash drive. I can physically carry that across to my standby instance location and then continue with this process to restore it there without having to use the network, which can be very, very helpful if you've got either a lot of databases that you need to transfer, or if your network's unreliable, or as I said, if the database is just very large. Both availability groups and multi-platform have some capability for real-time notifications in case things go a little bit awry. We'd like to think that we've got better notifications than the standard availability group offering in Standby Multi-Platform, simply because we allow this to be fine-tuned to a greater extent. So, for example, you can have notifications natively going to Slack channels, as well as just emails, just a few other kind of quality of life improvements like that. One of the problems with availability groups is that it's difficult to have a planned switchover. The very nature of availability group is such that switchover would typically affect both locations. In our product Standby Multi-Platform, you can literally do this in a single click. Let me demonstrate that to you now. So if I select any configuration, we'll go for this one here, why not? I'll move my screen there so you can see the full list of possible actions. So these are just some of the actions that you're able to take. And you can see right at the top here, graceful switchover. So if I select that, we do a number of pre-checks behind the scenes to make sure that a graceful switchover is possible at the moment. And all I have to do is press start. And what that will do is it will activate this database on the standby instance on SQL2. SQL2 is the host hosting the instance. It will then put the standby on the instance in SQL1 into restoring mode, essentially swap the roles of these databases. So if I hit start, you can see that task progress happening here, and again reflected in real time on the dashboard here as well. And you can see here that whereas previously we were SQL1 to SQL2, we are now SQL2 to SQL1. Simple as that. Another feature we have is something that we call automatic configuration creation. So what this means is that, that's what this little A button up here does. So for a given instance pair, if we go to our SQL Server instances and manage instance pairs, you can see these instance pair mappings. And what this means is that in this case, we're looking at SQL1 to SQL2. If we turn on these features, these toggles here for automated configuration creation, what that means is that any database that is created on this instance on SQL1 will actually automatically be picked up by our software. A disaster recovery configuration will be created for it, and then a standby database will also immediately be created for it, all completely automatically with no intervention whatsoever. So this allows you and again, in order to activate that, you just toggle this and click save. So this gives you a very simple way to ensure that every single database on your primary instance will always also be managed on, or synchronized and managed on your standby instance as well, without you even having to set up the configuration in the first place. If there are databases that you wish to exclude from this, then you've got the opportunity to do so using these excluded database name lists. Of course, no such functionality exists on basic availability groups. Our product facilitates EasyDR testing. So one of the possible actions for a SQL Server configuration is, keep having to move my video around, is this easy switch into standby mode. So switching a database into standby mode from restoring, as I'm sure you know, allows queries to be run on that database. This allows you to have an in-house set of queries that produce verifiable results. You can confirm that the standby database is, is healthy and contains everything that you expect it to contain. And you will allow you very easily to switch into that with one click, and then back to restoring with one click as well. Of course, with availability groups, that's possible, but it requires you to actually stop the synchronization and do this manually. We offer easy resynchronization if anything were to go wrong. For example, if the log chain was to be broken, if you're missing logs if you're missing transaction logs, then again, we have a button right here at the top, which allows you to resynchronize the primary and standby databases with a single click. So even if you have log files that go missing, you can always get your standby back to working order with a single click very easily. On availability groups, of course, this process takes a little bit of time because you need to essentially reinitialize the whole group. We also allow login replication. So in addition to actual data inside databases on an instance, what we also allow is to replicate logins. So again, one of the possible actions here, over here, synchronize logins. This will give you a list of all the logins pertaining to a selected database, let you know whether they exist on the standby instance. There's a bunch of functionality built in here behind the scenes to check whether the login is actually addressed to the same user, whether the passwords, the login credentials match or not, whether it exists at all, of course. And if it doesn't, you can port them over with a single click. Again, just a nice additional management tool. So one less thing for you to worry about. With availability groups, of course, only the data in the database that you've selected for the availability group will be transferred, but not any of the logins associated with it. Everything is done from our central control center. So that's what you're looking at right here. You can see that as the name implies, multi-platform, we actually manage both Oracle and SQL Server databases from a single dashboard. Of course, you can click this SQL Server tab at the top at any point to look just at SQL Server. And everything is done from here. So you always have a single pane of glass across your entire span of disaster recovery configurations. And all the information provided is in real time. So you've always got just one place to check everything. If there are any problems, they're immediately obvious, and you would remedy them also from this one location. With availability groups, of course, there's a whole bunch of places that you need to that you may need to act on, plus the underlying layer of Windows file clustering as well. Unlike availability groups, we allow you to act on more than one database at a time, so even across instances. So, for example, I've got these two databases here. They're both on the same instance between SQL 1 and SQL 2. So using these checkboxes here, I can actually select both of them at the same time and open what we call multiple configuration actions, and I can perform actions for them at the same time. So for example, I can back up and send logs for both of these, and you get a list of all the databases you're acting on there. And just with one click, you can see two tasks have appeared, and it was done across two databases. Just like with configuration creation, it's just as easy to do this for 200 configurations as it is for 2. It just gives you a nice way to accelerate your workflow. What have we got? Detailed central task history. So everything done through our software is always recorded in what we refer to as a task, and that's what you see on this timeline on the right-hand side. At any point, if you wish to get information into exactly what was done, you can find the relevant task. Just click on it, and it will tell you in a very detailed format exactly what was done, what the timestamps were, what was the order of steps, and if there is a failure anywhere along the line, it will tell you exactly at what point that failure occurred. And typically we actually suggest we catch a whole bunch of common error states, and we actually give you some guidance with how you might go about resolving them. Obviously, all of this is completely outside the scope of basic availability groups. We support offsite standby just as well as availability groups do. So if you want to have your standby in the cloud, for example, our product works there just as well as it does on-premise. We allow the creation of more than one standby from a single primary, unlike availability groups. So in our case here, you can see that in this case, we've got SQL 1 to SQL 2. These are hosting instances. So this database here that we call SQL test big database, we can see that it exists here between SQL 1 and SQL 2. And you can see that it exists here again between SQL 1 and SQL 4. So what that means is that this is actually the same primary database, but it is replicating to two different instances. You can set up as many as you like. We've got very similar recovery point objective goals for availability groups in our product. For automated failover, we allow a range of options. So the simplest of these is that we allow one-click manual activation at any point in time. So you can select any configuration at any time, click this activate standby button. We do a couple of pre-checks, and then if I hit this button, standby will be immediately activated. In addition to this, we also have a number of ways to actually have automatic activation in the case of any errors. So we facilitate that through the use of something that we call the observer, which is something that can be configured. In fact, let me select one that has it configured already, this one here. So what this is you can think of it as an outside eye that keeps an eye on the database states, make sure that the primary is online, make sure that the standby is in restoring state, checks that the network connection between the two works, checks that the time gap is not unreasonably large, a number of things like that. And you can either have this configured to issue notifications if it sees any problems, or you can actually choose to have it perform an automatic failover. So you literally specify your your check interval and the number of maximum failed checks that you're prepared to allow before action is taken. And then it will actually automatically perform a failover of this configuration for you. Again, just a fail-safe so that if something goes wrong at 4 a.m. in the morning, which is typically when it goes wrong, and there's no one in the office, you can be sure that your standby is going to come up straight away. Plus, we've got a few other goodies over availability groups in the end. So we have a comprehensive third-party API support program, and what that means is that if you are already running database monitoring tools, if you've got an in-house platform that you use for this kind of thing, you can tie our software into work with that, and that goes for withdrawing information as well as taking action. So for example, you can have there's an API call that allows you to withdraw all of this dashboard information to be used inside your own products, and you can also initiate any action that our own UI, our own product here can initiate. You can initiate it through this API. As I said before, our product is across database platforms. At the moment, we support Oracle and SQL Server, and not only do you manage them from the same place, you actually manage them in very similar ways as well. So if I was to click a SQL Server configuration, you'll see a bunch of actions, and just remember a few of them. We go synchronize, switch over, activate, right, backup and send logs. If I were to select this Oracle configuration, you would actually see a lot of the same actions here. Synchronize, backup and send logs, switch over, activate. We do leverage the strengths of each database platform, so there are some actions that will differ. For example, for SQL Server, you can synchronize logins, as I spoke about earlier. For Oracle, you might be able to do a bunch of other things. You can get a detailed log app report, or you can recreate a standby control file. But by and large, they are managed in as similar a way as possible. And what this means is that you can manage them from one place, typically with a single person overseeing both. And finally, we have behind this product, we have a very special low bandwidth architecture. So we've developed a way to both compress any log files that we ship across. We compress them during transit, and we also use our own network utility created in-house that actually offers far superior speeds to SSH as well, to make sure that those log files get to your standby location as quickly as possible, and they are again as compressed as they can be when they go across. Just something to essentially, just another way that we help to reduce the time gap between your systems. You might find that with an in-house script, a standard log backup transfer might take a minute, for example, on your infrastructure. With our product, you might find that it takes 35 seconds instead. And what that means in reality is that you can actually shorten the gap between log switches and thus keep your standby closer to your primary. So that's just a few of the main kind of comparison points between availability groups and standby multi-platform. I hope that was useful to you. I'll see you next time.